Hey guys, I'm back in Jackson this week, and I went to the Wyoming Fish and Game offices there to talk to the biologists and the scientists there, and we're actually out on a project today at Horse Creek, just outside of Jackson Hole. So we're with Aunt Anna, right? Okay, so we're going to talk to her about what she's doing and see actually the project that she's working on. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
You want to introduce yourself and your position there at the office?
Sure. My name's Anna Senecal. I'm the aquatic habitat biologist with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. So I'm on the fisheries crew. I work with fisheries biologists, and my background is actually in fish biology as well. But the type of work that I do is kind of more along the lines of hydrology. So oftentimes I'm doing things like stream restoration or fixing streams if they're highly degraded or eroded, if they're cut down, if the banks are really steep, if they don't provide good fish habitat. And then also I work on fish passage projects. And so that's where perhaps there's an irrigation diversion or a culvert that fish aren't able to move upstream of. We'll work with the landowners, with other agencies to change those sites so that fish can move and access habitats that are upstream, maybe for spawning or rearing nursery habitat. A lot of people don't recognize that fish need lots of different kinds of habitat in order to complete their life cycles, their life stages. And so that's kind of what I do, helping to put all the pieces back together.
Where are you from? And when you were younger, like these kids, we have kindergarten through 12th grade. Were you thinking about a job like this? And then how did you get into this job, schooling and stuff like that?
Sure. I'm not from Wyoming. I'm actually from California, but don't hold that against me. I grew up in Southern California and kind of all over. I've been in Wyoming for about 10 years now, and I moved out initially for a seasonal position with the Game and Fish. I got into this career honestly because of summers that I spent with my grandparents in Upper Michigan. Yeah, so out in the creeks, out in the lakes, doing things that you kids probably do every weekend that you're just very, very used to. We didn't have growing up in Southern California. So if I could impart one wish, it's for all of you to know how lucky you are growing up where you are. But so I knew from a young age that I wanted to work outside and that I was really passionate about water, about rivers and streams and lakes. And so I went to college. If you want to be a scientist, you have to do good in school, so you can go to college. So I went to the University of California at Davis, and I got a degree in wildlife biology. And then after that, I looked for work experience, and that's where the seasonal position with the Wyoming Game and Fish came into play. So I worked out of Casper and Sheridan and Buffalo and Cody on various fisheries projects. And then I knew that that was what I wanted to do and pursued graduate school. So it's a long road, but along that journey, you're able to explore what you do and don't want to do. So if some of you think that you might be interested in a career in fisheries biology or wildlife field biology in general, and probably any career, I would suggest that you get as much internship or seasonal experience as you can. Because even the jobs that you don't necessarily enjoy as much will tell you what you might want to do in the future or not want to do by default.
Cool. So what are we doing here today at this creek?
Sure. So Horse Creek is a Snake River cutthroat trout creek. There's spawning upstream. There's nice deep holes where large fish live, and there's public access. So for all of those reasons, it's a really important resource for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. It's a high priority. The Highway Department is doing a project to widen this road right behind us. You guys can probably hear it, the cars going by. And in doing so, they're going to replace this big concrete box, this culvert. The culvert right now, you can see, is narrower than the creek itself.
See that?
And when that happens, a process called scour. It's basically erosion. So that's when the water moves sediment, dirt, the sand, the rocks, and makes a big hole. Over time, the creek cuts down deeper and deeper and deeper, and the water goes faster and faster and faster, and that can make it really difficult for fish to move upstream. So in the process of replacing this culvert, we have some questions. One is, how easy is the culvert for fish to move upstream through now? And then after the fact, how has it changed? So we have a control, a question, and an experiment. We're going to see, we have a hypothesis, what's going to happen, and then after the fact, we'll see if we were right or not. So we're looking at a couple of things. One is the amount of water moving through the box and the speed at which that water moves. So those two things. And then also the timing of fish movement and whether or not they're able to move and how that relates to the water flow and velocity. So to answer those questions, we kind of have two different setups. The first one you can see behind me is an antenna. So there's a cable attached to this rope, and there's the bottom of the loop actually runs across the bed of the channel.
Oh yeah. So there's a kind of an oval loop in a way.
Yeah, and then you can see all of our gadgets and gizmos and boxes hidden up on the bank. Not hidden very well, mind you. And then out in the system so far, we have about 75 fish tagged, and they're tagged with tiny little microchips, kind of like what your dog or cat would have in them, and if the pound picks them up, the vet or the pound can scan them, and it'll come up with the ID of that animal. Well, we can do the same thing with fish, but instead of scanning them, all they have to do is pass through this array, this cable loop, and then it will log. The data will go to the equipment that we have up on the bank. So we'll be able to tell if any of those fish we tag move through the system. So we have one loop here, one loop above the box, and then some other loops further on upstream.
Okay.
So,
How did you get the chips and the fish and get them into the creek?
yeah, I wish we could have showed you guys that. We were actually tagging yesterday. So we use electricity to sample fish. Some of you have probably seen that. We have backpack units. They look like kind of like Ghostbuster backpacks. And we actually apply electrical current to the water to stun the fish temporarily so we can net them. And then we put them into a bucket and we inject the tags, which are tiny, teeny tiny, with basically a needle. And so they go into the abdominal cavity just below the muscles of the abdomen. And then we hold them for a while to make sure that they're okay, and then we release them. So
Sounds like fun.
yeah, it's kind of sci-fi.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
What else do we need to know about equipment and what you're up to?
Okay, so today what I'm up to is not as interesting as tagging fish, unfortunately. But what I'm doing is I'm going to measure the water that's moving through the channel right now. So to get a measure of the volume of flow, that's what we call discharge. We need a width of the creek, a depth of the creek, and then an estimate of how fast the water is going. And all of those put together give us a three-dimensional volume, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I'm doing that, and then I'm installing digital loggers that will automatically log the depth of the water every hour, as well as the water temperature. The loggers themselves, however, they won't give me an exact discharge. This is what they look like. And so this is going to go in that PVC pipe attached to the culvert. What it measures really is pressure. So it's going to measure a change in pressure as the water increases. The pressure will increase, like when you dive down in a pool and your ears start to hurt. So as the flow comes up, the pressure increases, and then as the flows come down. So it will show me a relative change, but in order for me to tie that to a real number of flow in the creek, I need to develop a relationship between an actual discharge and the pressure. So I'm getting my first data point today. So that's kind of cool. So I don't know if you want to film while I string a tape. And,
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So you're measuring the stream width?
And so at the end of the day, we want to share all this information with the highway department so that in the future we can design better road projects that do a good job of passing fish and allowing wildlife to move.
Okay.
Which we do, I think we currently, the state is great with terrestrial wildlife. So like what Allie was talking with you guys about, probably. We may have a little bit of catching up to do on the fisheries side of things.
Okay. Is that because maybe traditionally fish just thrived on their own, but the more we have human encroachment, the more care we need to take? Or
I think a big thing is that you never hit a fish with your car,
yeah.
so it's an easier problem to ignore. It's not as tangible.
What's your notebook?
So I'm writing because I can't remember everything. I will have to write everything down. Like the date is really important and the time, since the loggers measure by the hour. I want to match this reading, this data point up to the exact time on the logger, if I can. Yeah, so first I will measure the wetted width of the channel, which starts at 2.9. And then as I go along the tape, I'll just record the location on the measuring tape, the depth of the water column, and then the current velocity. And that's just how fast the water is going.
So you'll measure multiple points across?
Exactly. This channel's pretty flat and even, but in a lot of streams, it's not. So you would get different readings in different locations for depth. In this stream, there's lots of rocks, so if I have the probe behind a rock, it's going to be really slow.
Yeah.
And that if I just had one data point, that would be misleading. So we'll get an average.
So what's the machine or box do?
So this is a flow meter, and it is a gizmo that just tells me how fast the water is moving, and I don't know how. It's a magical box
Magic.
that reads the velocity to me. This metal rod lets me measure the water depth, but it also helps me to automatically set the bulb that reads the current speed at 6/10 of the depth of the water column, which somebody smarter than me has figured out that's where the average water velocity in the water column happens. So at the bottom, you can imagine the water moves a little slower because of the roughness, all of the rocks. And so a lot of times that's where bugs and critters, things like sculpin or days, smaller fish will hang out. And then as you move up in the water column, it starts to go faster and faster. Yeah. So at this spot, it's about 2/10 of a foot, pretty shallow. The location on the tape is 4.5. And the current velocity is 0.71, and that's all in feet. So the units of discharge are cubic feet per second. So that's 3 feet, FFF, divided by seconds. So the place on the tape is going to be a distance in feet. The depth is a unit in feet. And then the units of current velocity are feet per second. So if you multiply that all together over the whole channel, that's going to give you cubic feet per second. And essentially the cube of water that's moving down the channel at any given point in time.
And then you just compare that over time.
Yeah. Yep.
And you might have said this before, but after doing that for a month or 2 months or 3 months, what does that tell you that you need to know?
So it tells me what the actual flow in the creek is, how much actual water is moving through the creek when the automatic logger logs a certain pressure. And obviously I'm not going to be doing this all the time, every day, every hour of the day. And so those periods of time between when I can measure, so say I'll do this once a week for a couple of months, I'll develop a model essentially of what the discharge curve for this creek looks like. And then I will be able to infer, I will be able to look at the pressure and interpolate between my known data points of what that discharge is. Does that make sense?
Yep, to me.
Yeah.
Some of the younger kids are probably
Sure.
like, what?
Yeah. So let's see.
But I think they think it's interesting.
Let's see. So if the pressure transducer just tells me that over time, so this is time, and then this is pressure. So if it tells me that over time the pressure goes up as the snow melts and the rain comes and the flows increase and then it goes down, well, to me that's great and that's interesting.
So this might be today, and this is a month from now, and this is the pressure change in
Yeah.
the creek,
Yeah,
kind of, sort of.
that's interesting, but what I really want to know is how fast and how deep is the water and what does that mean for a fish?
At different stages of time.
So I want to be able to put this axis in over here that tells me feet per second or cubic feet per second. And to get that, what I'll do is I'll come out and I'll measure in the stream, hopefully at several points throughout this curve, what the discharge is. And for those periods of days in between the known points, I can come up with a pretty good guess. And that's what we call a model. It's a guess, but it's based on best information that we have.
Do you put all this into a computer that
Oh yeah.
spits out reports and stuff?
Yeah. Yep. The computer does it all. So that's what we got going on today.
Cool. Are you just going to work your way across?
Yeah, I'll probably save you the tedium of.
So guys, she's still doing all her measuring and stuff like that. Kind of interesting. But I guess these ledges, the wildlife have started using them as little bridges for small mammals pass through here. That way they can get safely through the culverts. So she said the next one they design, when they rip this out to redo the road soon, that's why she's doing all these studies, so they know what to build in here for the benefit of the fish. They're going to put these ledges back in. So I'm going to walk through here and show you. There's her measuring system and that string across the creek. Here's that culvert. This ledge is pretty narrow, so I might fall in. not very deep though. See if we see any fish in here. Whoa, I almost fell. I hit an edge. Looking to see if I see any fish. Not yet. Sometimes they'll be behind these big rocks. I don't see one back there. Oh wait, there's a little one right in there. I don't know if you can see it, but he's just kind of... So there's another measuring. So she said that she has wire above and below in the water, so when the fish pass through that loop, it triggers them passing through with those microchips they put inside of them. Kind of cool. Anyway, thanks for coming on this field trip with me. Hope you enjoyed it. See if I can pass through without falling in.